Welcome to this episode of the Cold Dead Hands podcast with your hosts, Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow and resident firebrand Brett Cross. Sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy as they bring you the stories told from the cold dead hands.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stories from the Cold Dead Hands, a radio show where we uplift the voices of victims. Too often, the media spends their time talking about the perpetrators of acts of violence, and we don't ever learn who the actual people that were taken from us are. I'm Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow. I'm one of the foremost experts on firearms in America, in the world. I have published about 17 publications on the guns and well-being. So what do guns do for us, as well as the social determinants of guns? Why do people own them, and why do they support certain policies? As always, my co-host is Brett Cross.
I'm Brett Cross. I lost my son Uzziah at the Robb Elementary school shooting in May 24th of 2022, and since then I've just been fighting for justice for him and for every other victim of gun violence.
We have two guests tonight. Our first, I'll introduce Steve. Facts Still Matter.
Thanks for having me, Ben and Brett. It's an honor to be here. I've joined you guys before. Again, Facts Still Matter on TikTok. I'm an advocate for human rights and prop up the voices of all marginalized groups. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. And
our other guest is Matt, U.S. McAngry veteran.
Yeah, hey, I'm Matt, longtime listener, first-time caller. Thank you all so much for having me up here. I hope I'm not really sure what I can add to the conversation, but I'm happy to be here anyway. So
we are definitely happy to have you. The chat's already blowing up. So tonight is a little bit different. Normally we would be talking with someone who had either lost someone or experienced a gun violence episode themselves, and then maybe have an extra guest like we've had Steve before to kind of talk with those individuals. But tonight we're doing something different because of an event that happened on Wednesday involving Brett, and I'll let Brett tell that story in a minute. But for the listeners, what we're really wanting to do tonight is talk about the policing of victims. Too often we see that the police focus their time and energy on the people who have been harmed in these events rather than putting their time and energy on either preventing these events from happening or even stopping the event, as was the case with Brett. Brett, you want to tell us what happened Wednesday?
Yeah, so I mean, it was I believe it was Thursday, but I don't know. I got knocked around a little bit, so I might be off. But no, we went to the pretrial hearing for Adrian Gonzalez and Pete Arredondo. We walked through the first set of metal detectors, wasn't no problem. When we were walking through the second set, the officers inside were giving us some shit. So, I'm not gonna listen. If you're gonna run your mouth to me, I'm gonna run my mouth back, right? You don't, just because you have a badge doesn't mean I'm gonna be like, yes, sir, no, sir. Anyways, my wife told the officer, she was like, yeah, so what they want to do is they want us to take off everything, right? I have a bunch of rings, I have a bunch of bracelets, necklaces and everything. My wife wears a necklace with Uzziah's thumbprint on it. So she told the officer, she goes, yeah, because my dead son's thumbprint is dangerous, right? I have to take this off. And, that officer smarted off and she was like, we're just doing our job. My wife said, well, if you'd done your job in the first place, we wouldn't be here, right? And so she walked away, and I told her, I said, hold up, come and get Uzi's ashes because his ashes are in my bracelet. So she walks back over there. I hand her the ashes, and the officer is like, you need to move away from me. And my wife's like, I'm not even by you. And the officer said something else, and my wife goes, don't fucking talk to me, and then walks away. At that time, I'm getting through the metal detectors, and I see like 4 cops come out of nowhere, and they start walking towards my wife, and I'm like, yo, hold on. What's going on? And they're like, you got to leave. And I go, why? And he said, or my wife goes, it's because I told her not to F and talk to me. And I'm like, what, are you going to arrest her for saying the F word like you did me? And then my arms are behind my back out of nowhere, and I'm getting pulled out of that lobby area, and I'm telling them, I'm like, I'm a grown ass man, I can walk, right? Like, let me go. And so we get outside. I'm still trying to pull my arms away from them because I'm not under arrest. They're just, being a-holes. And I finally get my arm out, and it swings me around because they're still holding one. And I start walking backwards. All of a sudden, one of the officers steps on my foot. I go down, and then they just pounce on me, you know. Caught a couple ribs to the chest, which is not fun. I'm telling them, I'm like, get off me, I can't breathe. And they're like, you're talking, you can breathe. And so my wife runs over there, and she's trying to pull them off of me because she hears me say that. And then they step on her foot and push her down. And yeah, that's, really what happened.
So, and you had that happen, and Matt, you were the first one to really talk about this, right? Like, I came onto your live. That's how I learned about it, because people started texting me, Brett was just assaulted, and I joined your live immediately, and you were talking about it. You want to talk about like how that day kind of went?
Yeah, I don't even know what we were talking about before that happened. And I don't remember who. I think it might have been Brett that just sent me a text that was like, I just got assaulted by the Uvalde Sheriff's Department. And I was like, the hell? No, what is going on? And then there was, I want to say it was San Antonio News 4, like the NBC affiliate or whatnot,
Yeah.
that was there. And almost immediately after it happened, they had a blurb up on their website and on their Facebook about it. And so we went through and looked. They had pictures posted, and for me, knowing the history of Brett and Nikki and what happened to them there, and the trauma that they have to experience every single day, just living there, to see them being treated the way that they were by the cowards that refused to even do anything. Like, I think one of the top comments of the live stream was, man, imagine if they had put that amount of energy into preventing why Brett and Nikki are going through this in the first place.
Yep.
And so we had a really long discussion with a lot of people about the current state of the United States of America, and how it's not improving, really. And through the entirety of the live stream, I had the 1 year anniversary screenshot from one of the news organizations that had editor's note, the sound of children screaming has been removed. And I started saying that is the motto of the United States of America today. E pluribus unum, and God we trust. That shit's gone. The motto of the United States of America is the sound of children screaming has been removed, because we have to make it palatable for people to be able to watch our network coverage on the 1 year anniversary of this absolute massacre. And so a lot of people were getting really pissed off. And we had a lot of really in-depth and impassioned conversations about the current state of this supposed greatest country on the planet that can't seem to keep our children alive when we send them to school. So
Yeah, and so like the sounds of children screaming has been removed. That was something that like we kept talking about throughout that episode. Brett, you have that tattooed on your body, but you also then with some of your mods and creators that work with you, decided to put that on the t-shirt, right, to immediately raise money.
yeah.
For Brett and Nikki. And that kind of brings us then into Steve, because after you got off the air, Steve got on and immediately picked up with the exact same thing. Steve, how did you take all the news, and what was going through your mind when you learned about what happened to Brett?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Matt was saying, I found out about it later that afternoon. I'd been live that morning, found out about it. So literally got as I was almost getting off of our show, and then got the news that, obviously the TikTok verse blew up, moderators saying this is what happened, and we all sort of jumped in. And again, to what Matt said, I sadly, it was as horrible and as despicable and as disgusting as it was to witness. My first thought was I wasn't surprised, sadly, just because I know Brett and Nikki's history in that community. I mean, you've been very frank with me about how, it's a fraternity of people in the community who've sort of aligned against you. So that's the sad and disgusting part, but trying to focus the attention on survivors, which is why I wanted to join the show. And then it's survivors, it's caregivers in general. It's the people that are left are the ones that often take the brunt of all these kinds of things, stigmatization or whatever it might be. So, we jumped on the whole fundraising opportunity that Matt and his team started. And we carried the same thing right through our program. And we've been raising money since. And just, it seems so trivial, but oftentimes that's kind of what you need to fight back against the system that's rigged against you. And I agree. We have a society here that claims to be the greatest country on earth. We can't protect our children. We claim to be the greatest society on earth. We can't offer mental health services. We hear that constant excuse, that constant complaint that it's not the gun, it's the mental health, it's the person. Okay, then how about we commit to providing mental health services to people and we just don't do it? How about victims advocacy? How about advocacy and mental health care for survivors? It just doesn't happen. We continue to fall. So I agree. The new motto of the United States of America, the sounds of children screaming have been removed. And again, the argument behind it is that they didn't want to expose the audience to the sound of children screaming. I mean, how pitiful is that?
Right. And it's
And
point out.
I'm just happy to be part of. I'm just happy to be part of the fundraising component of this to try to help you and your family out, Brett.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it more than y'all know, because it's gonna be a lot. We're still, searching for lawyers and everything like that, because this isn't unfortunately, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. This is the first time it's gotten to that extent. But if y'all remember back in February, I got arrested for saying the F word, which I would probably.
We're on GCPR. You can say it. You don't have to say the F word.
Yeah. So I, when that was happening, I was like, fuck, it's probably better just to get arrested than to get knees dropped on you, right? Like, and those men ain't small. And there was like
that
four of them.
brings the question up, Brett. Like, and before I ask the question real quick, I do want to point out that in that video clip where they removed the sound of children screaming, they did not remove the sound of gunfire. So you could still hear the guns being fired, but the sound of children screaming has been removed to make it more palatable. So like there are three questions. Shannon asked first, how are your and Nikki's injuries?
So we can't talk too much about that because of the litigations going on, but I will say that we're pretty banged up.
Well, that does lead to the second one. Is there any recourse for accountability? Right, like that was also Shannon's question.
Yeah, so we're looking to see what we can do, because how much more are they going to get away with this? It's like every time they take it a step further and a step further. What's going to be the end when I wind up not making it back? Like that's what, for the first time in my life, I worried about walking away from something, like and being able to survive. So at this point, as the trajectory has shown, they're not here to just silence us anymore. They want me gone, so.
The other question, which I really want to spend more time at the end, Victoria wants to know how we can continue to help you. I know one of the things that we started doing in Matt's live and kind of carried forward, and I carried it forward in several other lives that I've been on, is calling the Uvalde Sheriff's Office. But you had said now they're on vacation.
So they've been off. They went on vacation this week. So today they're not here today through next Monday.
Goddamn small towns. Matt,
yeah, I think the officers will be on duty, but like the people that answer the phone calls, the chief or the head sheriff, the assistant, they're all on break.
So the people who were supposed to call to file our complaints are not there to take our complaints.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And And you know, I sent in a FOIA request for the body cams, for the lobby footage, for the names and the badge numbers and everything. It's supposed to be around 10 days. I'm probably not going to get it within the 10 days if they give it to us at all, because if they give us the body cam and they give us the lobby footage, it shows that they are just 100% in the wrong and they don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt, I saw you shaking your head when you learned that. Like, what are your thoughts?
Um, so the, uh, the fact that there's nobody there, answering the phones, uh, I'm not surprised because I grew up in a small town also. So that makes sense. That makes sense to me. But I also just continuously get my mind blown that these people who stood around for 78 minutes and did absolutely nothing to protect children as they were being massacred in their classrooms have all the energy in the world to ignore requests for accountability. That just blows my mind. They have all the energy and courage in the world to skirt accountability for their inaction. When in reality, if they had just put their community above themselves, like they say that they do, right? Every police department that every sheriff's department that I've ever interacted with, they're all like, we put the community above ourselves. Except for you don't, right?
Not never.
Yeah.
Except for you
certainly,
don't.
They certainly had the energy to perp walk Brett out the door.
Well,
Plenty of
yeah.
energy to do that.
And
Right.
yeah, like, you know, they are so mad that Brett and Nikki won't shut up about this, that they continue to talk about this, right? Which keeps a spotlight on them, that they perp walked him and tackled him to keep him from watching a trial where they were trying to get out of it, right? The whole
Right.
purpose of that trial was to get the whole thing dismissed with prejudice
Dismissed.
so that
Yep.
they could not be charged with anything. And thank the whatever entities out there are listening that that the judge said, no, fuck that. Even though it will be what, it's a year, right, Brett? October is when it's
October of next year is what it
Yeah.
said
but
for the trial to start.
like you were saying, Matt, like the energy spent to prevent the parents from going in and actually rescuing their own kids, the energy spent harassing people like Brett and Nikki, right,
Mhm.
rather than holding themselves accountable.
And here's the thing. I I served 9 years in the Marine Corps. I deployed to 2 different combat zones. I was in the infantry in the Marine Corps. I know what it's like to be shot at. It is not the most fun thing in the world, right? I understand this, all right? Probably better than most. I have been shot at. I have shot back at people. It's not a fun time, all right? But at the same time, if there were people that were in trouble and needed help, there was zero hesitation on our end on moving into the situation and putting our lives at risk for the safety of others. And we're talking about Afghanistan civilians and Iraqi civilians that we didn't know, we had no connection to, other than the fact that we had invaded their country and occupied it for 20 fucking years, right? We had no connection to them. But if there was a situation that required American troops to move into a position that would put us in between innocent civilians and harm's way, we did it. We did it without hesitation. And I think what blows my mind is that we have militarized our police departments so much in the gear, equipment, and training and weapons that they carry around, but we've missed the one key factor about being in the military, and that is selflessness for others.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about, like, you know, this is something all of us have talked about before, right? Like the Supreme Court said that law enforcement does not have an obligation to protect and serve. And,
Yep.
you know, so what the fuck are they even out there for? Right.
Exactly. Yep.
You know, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going there. I mean, the Supreme Court stepping in. I mean, obviously granting immunity. We know future administrations want to expand immunity for police departments and for officers, and no commitment by law enforcement in air quotes to provide mental health services. They will continue to be militarized. They will not attend to victims. They are trained supposedly to de-escalate, and all they do is escalate. We know the good guy with a gun scenario never works. This is why people say ACAB. This is why these conversations happen. This is exactly the situation that we're in because they protect each other. Now it's just we see it time and time and time again. These incidences aren't isolated, sadly. What we saw on display was there's no other way to describe it other than abhorrent and despicable. And it just shows that the community out there is not there to protect and serve us. They're there to protect and serve each other,
Right.
sadly.
And unfortunately, like this isn't something that's unique to what happened to Brett, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
Brett, like you've been at numerous like gun protests. Like, is this not the norm in how law enforcement treats you all? You want to talk about?
Absolutely. If you speak out for your rights and not just for your rights, but if you speak out to in protest to reduce harm, for some reason the cops get fucking wild with it, you know? And yeah, you see it all the time. People get thrown down, thrown around. And it's just like like Steve said, like y'all all said, right? They took that oath to serve and protect, but at this point, it's just to serve and protect their own best interests, not to serve and protect the community. If one officer had served and protected this community, then one, we wouldn't be in this instance. And if that officer came later and was there to serve and protect, he would have been fighting alongside with us against all of these officers who just sat outside.
Yep. Yep.
I was gonna add to that if I could real quick. I mean, just watching that video, and I've watched it numerous times, and I'm sure you've seen it enough. All it would have taken would have been one person of the 9 or 10 that were there just to say, "Can we attempt to de-escalate the situation? Can we try, do we have to hold this father of a shooting victim down on the ground with our knees? Could we attempt to show some humanity and actually do our fucking jobs?" But no, they just rallied around each other.
Yeah, well, and then the sheriff said, "Oh, well, we're not going to press any charges." Like, what charges are there to press against me? You can't arrest me or Nikki for saying fuck. Like that's not an arrestable offense. Whether it hurts your feelings or not as an officer, it does not violate any law. So what I just that is what flabbergasted me a lot too, right? Like we're not going to press charges. No, but I am. like
Yeah.
you might not, and cool, like you would look stupid, but I sure as shit am, because I did not put my hands on anybody and they threw me to the ground, and it was just it was ridiculous, man.
Yeah, it really is. I'm scrolling back through just to see if we had any more comments and questions, but like most people are saying the same kind of things that we're talking about right now about how like, well, it's they serve and protect their own interests or, the thin blue line bullshit, right? But we see that, right? We see that with these types of groups and things where they will and this is also prevalent with with the other things that we talk about on the app with like the MAGAs, where they will defend the most abhorrent behavior because it's part of their group. If any of y'all want to jump in and talk about that.
Well, I mean that. I mean, we had the Matt Gates.
Where to start?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we had the. I mean, we start right here. We had the Matt Gates investigative report from the ethics committee released today, and they found that he did some absolutely horrid things to women, and underage women, minor girls, right?
Yeah, call it what it is. Teenage girls. Call
Yeah,
it what it is.
teenage girls.
Yeah.
And there are people out there defending it,
Mhm.
right? Saying, "Oh, well, the DOJ didn't bring any charges against it, so
Michael Cohen defended
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I this whole idea. I think what kind of blows my mind with all of this is that their utter defense of the most reprehensible behavior within their own group is in stark contrast to the moral superiority that they continue to shove down our throats.
Exactly.
Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see on display regularly is for those of us who just believe in human rights, let's start there. Baseline, when we challenge a person's opinion as to why they don't, the things that we're accused of in literally in just an attempt to call out people who don't prioritize human rights. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. I laugh so I don't cry about it, but it's literally that's how far we've come. It's an alignment to a belief, to your point that you just said, Matt. It's an alignment to their belief, the moral high ground that they claimed, the pro-life movement, the biggest lie ever told to our society, right? You care about life when, like, oh, I see, up until it's born. Right, got it. Number one cause of death for children under 17 in our country, 3 years running, is firearms. And yet you're unwilling to do a damn thing about it. Instead, even when Brett is pouring his soul out when he hosts his lives, the comments that he gets and just it's disturbing. I don't know where we go as a society unless we continue to talk about it. And it's heroes like Ben. It's heroes like Brett to call this shit out. And it's just this is what's necessary. To put it in, maybe it's shame, maybe it's utter embarrassment. I don't know. I'm gonna keep trying. I'm not giving up.
No, I'm not a hero. Let's make that very clear right now. There's a reason I'm in the villains guild, right? Like I recognize
Fair.
You're a hero to all of us short kings out there. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, like I mean, Brett did say that if Nightwing was my actual height, he would be terrifying.
Scary.
But like no, like to everyone's point, right? Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of comments that Brett gets. Like I've personally seen it. I mod for Brett on occasion when I'm in there with him, mostly because I get just like I did on Matt's live the other day. When I see those horrible things where people are saying shit like that, I have a zero tolerance policy for that. And it was even in your live, Steve, like one of the regular trolls that comes to all of our spaces, right, started to say some bullshit. And I was like, I'm giving you one warning. I will permanently ban you from this space. And he immediately shut up and didn't say another word, right?
Yeah.
I'm back.
Yeah.
But like I've seen people say things to Brad like, your son dying was good because it means I get to keep my Second Amendment, right? Charlie Kirk said that shit. Charlie Kirk said that, it's the price of freedom, right? JD Vance said, oh, you know what? It's just a fact of life. Donald Trump said, oh, you know what? We should just get over it. 2 days after a mass shooting took the lives of people in Iowa, right? Brett,
You can't forget Greg Abbott either telling us, oh, it could have been worse.
But no, AR-15 lapel pins in Congress within days of a mass shooting event.
Yeah, no, and that, like, those aren't even the most important comments that we get. Like, I've had people tell us that Uzziah deserved it. I've had people told us that it was our fault, that we should have protected him better. I've had some disgusting people say the most atrocious, like sexually innuendo filled comments about my son. And it's just at this point, it's like I don't think that I could hear anything else that would mess with me anymore. Like I have heard the most depraved shit, so nothing surprises me at this time, and I don't think anything ever can.
Well, like, how often have all of us asked someone, right? Like, would you give up your firearm if it meant that no more children would die? And they look us right in the face and say, nope, won't do it.
Too many times.
Daily.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple times daily.
Yeah. I mean, and it's one of those things where the argument will always be, well, my right to own a gun is not to be infringed, right? You can't take away my right, because they only focus on that one right, right? They only focus on that Second Amendment with their flawed interpretation and understanding of the amendment to begin with, right? Because of the millions and millions of dollars that the NRA has spent to make sure that everybody is not up to speed on what the Second Amendment is, what it was intended for, and how it's enforceable in the Constitution in other areas. right? But they conveniently left out in the 14th Amendment an individual's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And unless you believe that children aren't people, which I would agree that they probably don't, given their pro-life stance on things, then that child also has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So whose right is more important here?
Yeah.
So whose right is actually more important here? Is it your right to own a gun, or is it that child's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or is it everybody? Does everybody have the rights?
But how many of them, Matt, take the viewpoint that I got mine, fuck you, right? Like,
no, that is the viewpoint.
That's it, right? Like, that's their entire viewpoint, right?
Yeah,
like, it's my
that
rights are all that matters.
Right.
No one else's matter at all, right?
Yes.
As long as
100%.
I got mine, fuck you.
Yeah.
It's the same group. I mean, similar conversations. I mean, I know our topic's about tonight, but it's the same about women's reproductive rights and rights to their body. You know, like what if your daughter was raped? Would you demand that she get an abortion? No, I would never let her. I'd never let her get an abortion. Even if my daughter was raped, I would not let her get an abortion. That's the pro-life group. It's the same people that will not give up their Second Amendment rights. Let's say for argument they were right with their interpretation on the 2A. Let's say they were right. We know they're not. Let's say they were. It's still ingrained in their head that they're not going to give up their right, even if it meant saving their own child. Never mind somebody else's kid, their own child.
Yeah.
I'll never understand that. And quite frankly, I'm glad I'll never understand that, because then humanity's lost if we all did.
But you know, and to y'all's point though, like you're right. They always say, "Oh, it's the Second Amendment," but then they agree when Trump wants to arrest people for burning the U.S. flag, which is covered by the First Amendment,
right?
And they're okay with him saying, "Oh, well, we'll take your firearms without due process," even though that violates the Fifth Amendment. But because it's him, like they don't care about the rights.
They don't even
just care about
rights, Brett. You know that. Like, how often did we try and get them to tell us what does the 2A mean? And the only words they can say is "shall not be infringed." Like, they can give you the last 5, and that's it.
Tyrannical government.
Yes.
Right. So that kind of leads into a whole nother thing. The tyrannical government argument.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it. What's really funny to me right now is in the current climate that we've all kind of found ourselves in.
Hellscape. You mean hellscape?
This nightmare of an existence. We've had numerous people continue to come out and say, numerous people on the right come out and say that violence is never the answer. We cannot allow violence to dictate policy in the United States of America. Those same people will use I need firearms in case I need to violently overthrow a tyrannical government as justification for the Second Amendment. So it's really funny to me when people are like, violence is never the answer. I'm like, bitch, it is the second number on the list. It's the second one. Like, we tried the talking thing. You didn't listen. Yeah. You put it right behind talking. It's the second thing, guys.
We suggested you pray it away. That didn't work.
It's the second thing on the list.
The First Amendment, that's the thoughts and the prayers.
That's thoughts and prayers. That shit hasn't worked. The Second Amendment is I guess it's time to overthrow a tyrannical government. That sounds pretty violent to me. I don't know, man. I think if we're ordering things and the number, from 1 to 10, and like the most importance of things, right? We got thoughts and prayers at number 1, right? And then it's violence, and then it's all downhill from there. It's thoughts and prayers, and then, that didn't work. Time for violence, boys.
Every time that overthrow a tyrannical government comes up, the very next question I ask is, how do you deal with a Reaper drone, right? Because they're not going to send a Marine to collect their weapons or deal with them. They're not going to send a soldier to do that. And certainly no one from the Air Force or Navy, right? Like, they're not going to send anyone person or group to collect those weapons, they're going to send a Reaper drone. And for the listeners out there that know anything about this or not, right, the maximum firing range of a AR-15 is about 1,500 meters. The minimum operating ceiling for a Reaper drone, which is the lowest level it flies at, is 10,000 meters. So it's like nearly 9 times like the distance that you can effectively use the best weapon that they could potentially buy in the United States, right? What the fuck are they going to do when that shows up?
Well, first of all, they can't count that high anyways. Like that's the problem. That's why they stop at the Second Amendment. They don't know
They can
anything
only
after
count to
that.
15. AR-15.
Yeah, it reminds me of
Yeah.
that song that floated around TikTok. I can only count to 4.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's it.
So
No.
Ben, from a sociology, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, from a sociology perspective, though, Ben, it seems like and we've talked about this before. It's the Rambo fantasy, right? It's the Call of Duty fantasy. It feels like it's, I am the one. I am the Winter Soldier who will defend the entire community from all the bad people in the government. And that seems to be a lot of it, at least from we all have spoken to these people. It really seems to be something that, in their mind, they're the hero in some strange, twisted universe.
Yeah, so like I won't go into the full because I've done it before, but I won't spend 30 minutes going through the whole history of how like guns became what they are in the American imagination. But needless to say, it was the work of people like Samuel Colt and then Edwin Pugsley, who was the Winchester historian, who basically paid Hollywood to put them in movies, right? Like Colt famously told the dime store novelist that I don't care if the hero of these stories has a name, but you will name my gun in every book, right? And that's why Pugsley did the same thing with Hollywood. And that's why if you look at the IMDb page for Clint Eastwood, so many of his early movies, he plays a character with no name, right?
The Man with No Name series.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because they didn't give a shit about that. They wanted you to name the weapon, right? And so like that, along with modern Hollywood people like Michael Bay, who more explosions, bigger guns, right? Like Danny Trejo mounting a freaking Gatling gun on a motorcycle, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger carrying a Gatling gun, Rambo holding 2 saws in his hand, right? Like these kind of things that never would happen in real life, right? Like not even possible in some cases. They knock your arm off. But they look cool on television, right? And then video games like Call of Duty allow us to have that kind of fantasy. Die Hard puts it into our mind that a single man with his Beretta and no shoes can take out a whole terrorist cell, right? Like all of these things play up to our hero fantasy. And that's why, like in the research in sociology, we find that men are empowered by firearm ownership. They find that they are stronger and more self-assured. And like my own research has shown that. And it especially peaks with masculinity, right? The paper size matters, penis dissatisfaction and gun ownership in the United States, talks about how like with peaks of testosterone at around 18 and 45, like men feel secure and powerful by having their AR-15, right? So like we see that, for instance, men in financial distress, and we found this in another paper as well, will buy a gun to restore stability into their lives.
Since you did mention Die Hard, not a Christmas movie. I'm just going to lay that out.
Absolutely a Christmas movie.
Okay.
100%.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us.
Until Alan Rickman gets thrown off the building, it's not Christmas.
So, and yes, the Hollywood angle of everything, and video games and television and whatnot, there's just been this massive glorification of firearms in the United States of America, right? Like one of the, some of the most popular movies out there are these war movies, right? That show the heroic actions and deeds of individuals in combat. You look at like Hacksaw Ridge and, Saving Private Ryan and,
Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, Black Hawk Down, Sands of Iwo
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn, you look at, Band of Brothers, you see all of these, and look, there are stories and actions that need to be portrayed to tell about the heroism of, United States of America troops in combat and the situations that they find themselves in. But we need to figure out a way to tell those stories without glorifying and, for lack of a better word, sexualizing it, because goddamn, is it sexy when you look at it, right? Like
We're
there is
fetishizing it,
no
right?
way, there is no way that you can watch a movie like that and be like, you know what? Fuck, I think I could be John Basilone. I could do that shit. Yeah, I
True.
could do that.
Well,
I
and to be
two
fair, right?
fucking medals of honor and fucking running around like I could do that.
Well, and to be fair, I think all of us have fired like either an M4 or an AR-15 at some point, right? Like they're sexy to fire too,
They're
right?
fun.
You know,
Yeah.
they're so much
They're
fun.
fun.
I get it. I do
Yeah.
get it, right?
Yeah,
Not worth a kid's life.
absolutely not.
Nope.
100%. In a heartbeat, gone forever. If it would say, and here's the thing, like, I don't even need it to save every kid's life. If you told me that me giving up my firearms would save the life of one child, done.
Done. Yeah.
Not even hesitation.
And I've told this before, right? Like my turning point was Sandy Hook, right? Like I remember Columbine. I was just out of high school. I remember when Columbine happened, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, that's really fucked up. I can't believe that happened." But it was like an anomaly to me, right?
Right.
And I remember Virginia Tech again. I just thought the same way. But Sandy Hook was the moment that changed it for me. And I wish I could say that like I went about it in a better way. But I got rid of all my guns. I probably had 16 rifles, and most of them were military style rifles. I had 2 AR-15s, a couple of SKSs. I had a bunch of things, right? Like that, you know, I would take to the range. And Sandy Hook happened. And suddenly people were saying, we can't do anything in the wake of this event that killed like 6-year-old kids, right? So I sold all of my guns. I wish I could say that I was like, oh, I donated to be destroyed or something, right? But I did at least get rid of them all because I was like, I can't be complicit in a hobby that justifies the murder of children, right? And I owned a gun again until the pandemic happened. And it was just because it became so expensive because I would still go to the range, I would still shoot, but I would rent guns at the range. And it became so expensive during the pandemic that like I was like, I can't afford to do this. So it was cheaper to buy a handgun for that purpose. And I probably, had the pandemic not happened, I would probably still not own one today, right? Because I still kind of feel good about being complicit in that.
Right.
To me, it always comes down to society has a civilized society has a responsibility to respond. And this seems to be the one area where there's just been not enough energy and or motivation. Although if you look at the voters by and large agree that there should be something to be done. But it comes back to money. Matt talks about this a lot. I talk about this all the time. The influence of money and power and lobbyists and corruption and messaging from the NRA and other groups that support it. And, you know, that's an uphill battle. So this is why, you know, you've talked about this very, very boldly and loudly, Ben, about how this is an opportunity for those who still believe strongly in their rights of the Second Amendment. There's moderates in Congress now that you might be willing to work with, because if progressives take power, then you can kiss that fucking right goodbye, because that's it. They're done. They grew up with active shooter drills. They're done. So this is your window, and there's just no movement. So
following Parkland, you know, the survivors of Parkland confronted Marco Rubio at a town hall. This is days after, and they flat out asked him, you know, knowing what you know now, what happened in your state, will you tell us right now that you will no longer take any money from the NRA? And he looked that kid right in the eyes and said, I will always take money from the NRA because their priorities align with mine.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
Dead
And
children?
that's the mindset of America, though. That's the mindset of the United States.
The new motto, right, Matt?
Yep.
Yeah.
The screens of children will be
Let's bring it
removed.
back full circle real quick, because that goes back, and you were saying it right, Matt. Like I've said similar before, but I think you just encapsulated how we make it so fucking palatable, right? That we can consume this violence without actually having to be affected by it, without having to actually think through what we're consuming.
Yeah, and that all comes back to advertising dollars and, you know, billionaires controlling the media and all this shit, because they don't want change. They don't want things different. They want to be able to affect you emotionally without traumatizing you. That's what they want to do. And so they'll leave the gunshots in and take the screams out, because you know what comes after the gunshots, and your imagination will fill in the blanks, right?
Mm.
And you'll have that emotional response where you won't be able to turn off the TV. And if you don't turn off the TV, right, and you continue watching, then eventually you're going to see that McDonald's ad, and now you're going to want a Big Mac. And
See, I
now
would
you need to
challenge
go
that
get
a
a Big
little bit.
Mac.
I would say they do want change. They want to suppress more voices. They don't want
Oh,
Brett
sure.
Meade to show up in courthouses. They don't want people to speak out against it. They want to
Yeah.
they want to control the entire fucking narrative.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of that's what I meant there, is that they don't want to change in a way that prevents them from being able to capitalize and monetize off of the tragedy of other people.
Gotcha.
And that's why they make things palatable. That's why they remove the screams of children from the video playbacks. That's why they talk about the shooters all the time. They talk about the perpetrators, the predators. They talk about the people committing the atrocities all the time, because that makes you angry, right?
Yeah.
That makes you mad. Now you want to go out and get a firearm of your own so that you can be that good guy with a gun to prevent the next one from happening. They don't want to talk about the kids that don't have a chance to go to fucking recess tomorrow.
Right.
They don't want to talk about the kids that should have been graduating high school this year. They don't want to talk about them. The names of the Sandy Hook kids, there's probably 33 people in the United States of America that remember all the names of the victims of Sandy Hook. Probably 33. But I guarantee you, if you ask them to name a victim, they would stumble. If you ask them to name a perpetrator, they could rattle off 5.
Yep.
They could rattle off 5 because we make it palatable. We make it easy to consume this type of atrocity committed against the most vulnerable demographic in our society. We just make it palatable.
Yeah, and I say that all the time, right? Like, you know, before this happened, and I feel terrible about it because I was one of those people, you know. Before this, I couldn't tell you I couldn't name one Columbine victim, but I could tell you who did it. I couldn't tell you one Sandy Hook victim, but I could tell you who did it. Couldn't tell you a Parkland victim, but I could tell you who did it because that was pushed down our throats like that and glorified in this way. So that is why I am as loud and as boisterous as I am, because when people think of Uvalde, I don't want them to think of that piece of shit that did that. I want them to think of Uzziah, you know? I whenever anybody hears the word Uvalde, I want them to think about Uzziah, you know, but that's not how it is. That's not how the media does it. You know, the media has gotten better, I think, a little bit. They're a little bit better with the no notoriety after the first few days, whereas, you know, back when Columbine happened, it was everywhere all the time saying their names. But at the same time, it goes to your point. They do it in a way to make you comfortable. And I don't, that's the thing too. Like, people will tell me it's hard to listen to you because it makes me uncomfortable. I want people to be uncomfortable because if you're uncomfortable, your child's alive.
Right? Yeah. No. And like, to talk about the no notoriety, right? Like that, I mean, the whole purpose of this radio show was to avoid that, right? And to talk about these people, right? So that we can get to know who they were. But there is a statistical correlation between how much time media, including what we do on social media, spends talking about the perpetrator and naming the perpetrator, and the number of events that follow, so that in 14 days, there typically are 3 events, right? It's like a 0.3 increase in the odds for every hour that a news or social media group talks about the perpetrator of having another event. And that's statistically works out to be about 3 events in 2 weeks. And if you look back, all of you think about it, right? Like, that's usually how it falls. That's usually what happens.
After Georgia, there was like 45 arrests because of threats within 3 days.
Yep. And, you know, yeah. So like we had Georgia, but like, you know, how often too do we see, like, you know, first of all, the first thing they scream is, oh, you need God in schools. But then when it happens at a religious school, right, then it's like they're trying to find ways to justify, like, immediately they wanted to accuse the young woman of being trans.
Right.
Correct.
Yep.
Feminist, or whatever it might be.
Yep. And that all just goes back to the fact that this country has found every reason to justify why this happens, right? And if there isn't a reason, right? If it happens at a public school, well, they should have had God in schools.
Yeah.
If it happens at a Christian school, well, this was an outside influence that came in to this holy place and did this. If it happened at a grocery store, well, that guy was mentally unstable. If it happens at a church, well, that guy was, he was disturbed. He had issues, right? And we will go through and we will argue. And I think this is the problem. We argue it, right? We argue that it's not that. We argue over and over. Here's the statistics that it's not that. Here's the statistics that show that the majority of people that are committing these types of atrocities have no mental health episodes or anything documented before they do the thing that they did. Right?
Yep.
So we could go
Like
through and
15%.
we spend all the time arguing why they're wrong, right? When and it just came to me because I do it too. I argue this all the fucking time. When in reality, what we need to keep doing is be like, shut the hell up. That argument is tired and run its course. The only thing, and I mean the only thing that we have not tried to do is restrict who can get guns and when. That is the only thing that we have not tried. But we won't try it because, again, we go back to the way that it's portrayed in the media landscape through Hollywood, through news reports, through television, through video games, through books. Violence is glorified in the United States of America. Our founding of this country was violent. 40 years after we started this country, we started killing each other because we didn't agree with how everybody was doing shit. We started killing each other. Violence is the foundation of the United States of America. And if we ever want to see any kind of effective change in this country to prevent this in the future, we have to stop teaching it that way. We have to. I will agree that violence is not the answer. I will agree that civilized people, advanced beings on the planet that we call Earth, should be able to sit down and say, I don't agree with the way that you're doing things. You don't agree with the way that I'm doing things. Let's come to a compromise where we both get a little bit of something.
You know who said that same thing though, Matt? You know who said that? Ronald Reagan. And he passed the Mulford Act in 1967, said, I see no reason why civilized people should be bringing firearms to a conversation, right? Ronald Reagan, right?
But here we are.
Yeah, and here we are. And the other thing, real quick, Brett, like the other thing, like when we frame this as a mental health issue, that deflection tactic is purposeful because if it's the act of a crazy, lone, deranged wolf, then no laws will solve the problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can't predict the crazy person. You can't predict the person that's unhinged. So what laws would do it, right? Like, which is asinine because firearms are like the only social problem that we just say, nope, don't need laws to deal with it. We don't do that with drunk driving, right? We don't do that with like speeding. We don't do that with murder. We don't do that with anything else. But when it comes to restricting firearms, immediately, no. Like even think about, we talked about it earlier, women's reproductive health. We're going to stop abortions by passing laws to prevent women from being able to get one. But we can't stop gun violence by passing laws to restrict guns because that won't work. Right.
Yeah, well, and it just goes to this ties into what both of y'all were saying. But I think it's even further. I think it's all money because alive children don't bring in money. It's when children are killed that it brings in money, because when my son was murdered, the NRA right away was like, they're going to try to take your guns, go out and buy more. So then they buy more. And then these companies that manufacture these firearms, well, then they donate back to the NRA because you just help us make a few more bucks. And then the NRA donates it to these politicians who then put AR pins on their lapels. And then they fight against laws that would help keep children alive, because if children are dying by guns, then the gun industry is making money.
That's right. I mean, it's the normalization, right? And if you guys, Matt and Ben, you both touched on this. It's like it's part of the punch down culture, right? So everybody is to blame. There's always it's the mental health, so therefore it's this deranged person. Don't worry, don't need to change the laws. It was a trans person, even though it wasn't. See, it's a problem with their mental health again. It's this weird thing. It's the poor. It's immigrants. It's everybody else. It's everybody else except the fucking problem.
Yeah. Well, we hear that all the time too, and we'll reset the show in just a second. But like, how often have people tried to bring up like Riley Lake and about the one immigrant that, you know, murdered somebody and
Right.
not want to talk about how the fact that 98% of mass shooters are white men,
Exactly.
right? You know, all right.
And
It's about 10 o'clock. Let's just take a real quick second to reset the show. For everyone who is just joining us, welcome to Stories from the Cold Dead Hands, a radio show where we try to uplift the voices of victims and spend time talking about them, because too often the media spends time only talking about the perpetrators of violence. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow. I am a internationally recognized gun scholar, having published multiple publications on things like guns and well-being, as well as the social determinants of firearms and firearm policy. So in other words, why do people want guns and why do they support certain policies? My co-host, as always, is Brett Cross.
Yeah, I'm Brett Cross. I lost my son Uzziah in the Robb Elementary School shooting, and since then, I've been getting the shit kicked out of me by cops.
That's fair. Tonight's show. We'll start with Matt. Matt, you're one of our guests tonight.
Yeah, my name is Matt. I'm USMC Angry Veteran across all platforms. Just here to support and lift up Brett's voice, try to provide, any kind of insight that I have, even if it's vulgar ridden and aggressive. So that's kind of my whole thing.
That's
I'm, I'm Steve, Facts Don't Matter across all socials, YouTube, Blue Sky, TikTok. I'm a white guy in America in a system built by people who look like me to benefit people who look like me, and I want to be a traitor to the patriarchy.
Rock on. So we've been talking tonight about, you know, what happened to Brett, about how, you know, that thin blue line often means like caring more about the protecting the organization than the people, how they don't really protect anybody anyway because they don't have a constitutional obligation to, and then how it kind of spread out into gun owners are just selfish bastards, right? Like they only care about their own right. They don't really care about kids in general. You know, for the second half, let's kind of talk about like, all right, where do we go from here, right? Like we know that there are some of these gun owners that we will never reach, right? But Brett and I have had a little success, I feel like, a little success reaching some of them, right? Where do we go from here? And I don't know who wants to start.
I'll start. I think I've as a progressive, and it's funny when I say progressive, the world laughs at us because when society doesn't have basic things like universal health care, how can you be progressive? We have an underfunded education system in our society. I believe in overfunding of public education. I believe in having world-class schools that include education about systemic racism and the epidemic of violence in our country and how marginalized voices continue to be suppressed. I'd like to speak to the fact that we have a history of the gun culture and how it's impacted us. So many things point back to education. So many things. I know that's not going to solve everything, but at least could we align on a common set of facts so that we can move forward at least a little bit, baby steps? That's where I'd start.
I second that 100%. We talk about it all the time, especially when people want to quote the Second Amendment and they only memorize 5 words out of the
Right.
whole thing. But that's because your common U.S. citizen has a 5th or 6th grade reading comprehension skill, but that's by design, right? If you keep people uneducated, if you keep them dumb, then there's no way that you stay in power if they are educated. So the people at the top, they want to keep you down. They want to keep kids dying because then if children are being unalived and don't have higher than a 6th grade education, then you can say, oh, it's not the gun's fault. You can say the stupid shit like, oh, well, are you going to blame spoons for making you fat? Are you going to blame pencils for spelling wrong? Because they don't understand that, you know, the true issues behind everything. So I agree 100%. We need to, if America wants to be as great as they claim they are, they need to educate their citizens, because an educated populace will be a more healthy populace, which will be a more understanding populace, which will have a better mental health, you know, going forward. It helps everything, I think.
Preach.
Yep.
I think where we go from here is we have to keep having the conversations. We have to keep getting upset about it. I think one thing that happens to people in the United States of America is that because it gets so palatable to listen to, we're so desensitized by the fact that children are literally dying in their classrooms from something, not because they choked on a piece of food or there was some tragic accident, but because somebody had ease of access to firearms, broke into their school, and massacred them at their desk. We have to stop trying to use palatable language. We have to stop trying to use palatable imagery. We have to make it as visceral and as disgusting as it is, because the last thing that the citizens of the United States of America need is to be placated to and fed a palatable dish of our murdered children.
Facts, 100%. And that's, you know, I look back in doing a lot of the stuff that I do, I look and I'm like, the only reason why we remember Emmett Till is because his mom did not let it be consumed so easily. You know, like, it made you uncomfortable. You know, that's why when, you know, when the Washington Post did their story about it and they had the picture of the blood in my son's classroom and the picture of the body bags, I'm looking at that picture knowing damn well that my son is in one of those body bags, which is one of the hardest things ever. But I wanted people to see that, because you see their smiling faces. Like when this happens on TV, or when it happens in the news, right? It shows all the smiling faces and everything like that. And we talk about them. We talk about the light that they are in our lives. But that's what, not how they spent their last few moments. My son was not smiling. He was terrified, more than likely screaming out for mom and dad, you know, needing something, you know. And I want people to realize that, because that could be your child.
To Matt's
And
point, I'm sorry, Brett, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to Matt's point, the sounds of children's screams should not be removed.
Yeah. But you know, Victoria pointed it out in the YouTube chat, right? Like, this is the American experience, right? This is what it means to be American. You know, and to Brett's point earlier, right? The about the educated populace, but they don't want us educated, right? They want you educated enough to do a job, not educated enough to question why you do it the way you do it, right? Like, they want you to be able to read the manual enough to, like, not blow the nuclear plant up, Homer Simpson, right? But not educated enough that you start to question the practices of the people who are above you. And you know, and that's why I think we run into some of these issues, right? Like, WB Du Bois said that we can solve all problems with education. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I think it helps. I think it goes a long way. But the reality is that our education system is so broken, right? Here in the South, for instance, we were taught that the Civil War is the war of Northern aggression, right? Yep. That it's not, you know, you're from Kentucky, you know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. The war of Northern aggression, that it was this, that they were coming to just steal our way of life. Well, what fucking way of life were they talking about?
Right.
Damn Yankees. Yep.
Yeah. But that all goes back to using flowery language and palatable language to discuss hard issues. I am of the mindset that language is supposed to be at times harsh, aggressive, and uncomfortable.
Preach.
And it's because of situations like this, where our children are more accustomed to active shooter drills in their schools than they are to their multiplication tables.
Right.
Because our children are getting bulletproof backpacks for Christmas and not a new jacket, right? We have an entire industry around safe rooms in elementary schools. Why? Because we don't want to just fix the fucking problem. And this goes back to what Brett was talking about, how it's all about fucking money. There is an industry to be made from the blood of children. There is money to be made from the screams of children. There is money to be made from the murdering of our children. And as long as we keep dumbing down the language and making it easy to consume, we're going to continue to allow this to happen. We need to really start getting into the habit of saying, no, they weren't. And I know, like, the social media sites are a whole fucking thing because of the way that they moderate their system. But the fact that we have to say that children were unalived in their school, and not, these children were fucking murdered in their schools because they had the audacity to go and try and get an education in the supposed greatest country in the world.
Well, you know, there was a live Brett and I did about a month ago, I think. Remember, it was the woman from the other country that is in like a civil war and was like, you know, talking about mass stabbings, right? Like, and what did she say? It was like they'd have one in maybe 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's like 1 in 6 million.
Yeah.
Happens. Right.
It is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
The hoops that we jump through with that.
But and then to your point, Matt, I've always said, and this is why I catch so many bans on every social media, is because I cannot stand doing that. When I first got on TikTok and trying to talk about this, you know, it was, you had to say pew pew, which minimalized it, right? My son wasn't killed by a pew pew, right? Like, he was slaughtered by an assault rifle. He was slaughtered by a gun. And so we can't talk about guns,
right?
Because if we start talking about it, then we can maybe find some common grounds and agree on some things so that we can change things. But when these same people that the government benefits is in control of a lot of these companies, then, you know, they want to keep us quiet. And then that goes back to these cops here in Uvalde too. Like, they're fucking stupid, because every time they want to try to silence us, all they do is just bring the attention back to them. And as bad as it sucks, and as terrible as, you know, I am, both, and me and Nikki both are, physically and mentally, because the mental part of this shit is fucking crazy. I will continue to get my ass beat by cops if it means that people are still talking about Uzziah, and people are still talking about, you know, these officers need to be held accountable. If people are still talking about there are children dying in schools and we need to do something about it. Literally, the only reason why people still talk about Uvalde, it's not for how many kids were killed. It wasn't for what weapon was used. It was because the cops, right? Like, that is the only reason why. Because if the cops had went in and did their job, it was what, 17 Hispanic kids. That wouldn't have been talked about more than a week after that. Especially in you know, social media and shit like that. So
to that point, though, Brett, to that point, like, you can't keep getting beat up, because eventually the healthcare may deny your claim, which then leads us directly into the next point of topic that I want to talk about is, could things that like happened to Brian Thompson maybe bring about some changes in gun laws?
I think the next day, I had asked this question, hosting a live on this particular topic. Was this the beginning of a revolution? Was this going to start something? Perhaps I was naive, but because I was thinking from the big picture perspective, because there's not one person in our country who's not been impacted by our healthcare system. Not one. I don't know anybody. As somebody who had to fight for rights for my daughter to get access to healthcare that would save her life, I get it. So you look at what happened. I'm not an advocate for vigilante justice. I'll say that now. But a situation like this to shine it, it's almost like a confluence of an unregulated firearm industry and an unregulated healthcare industry, and they met on a sidewalk in New York City. I'm not going to lose sleep over a CEO losing their life. I'm not. I'm not. I don't,
Yep.
the whole martyrdom, the whole hero fantasy, whatever that might be, but the imagery you see of Luigi being brought back to New York with fucking Eric Adams standing behind him. I mean, come on. Come on. If there was hope for a galvanizing moment in our society, I thought maybe that was one. I thought maybe we could say the healthcare system, the billionaire class, corporations. I have somebody who used to work in the health insurance industry years ago. Part of their P&L is denying claims. That is a business model. That is a revenue generating stream in that industry to deny healthcare claims. And United Healthcare is notorious for raising the bar for everybody in that, or lowering the bar, I should say.
70% are denied.
Exactly.
Right? But more of what I was thinking is that following the murder of Brian Thompson, right? The public outcry was so like, we saw how everybody reacted, right? And
Yeah.
the billionaire class, the CEOs, the billionaire class were upset that we couldn't empathize. They were upset that we didn't feel sorry that one of their own had been taken, right? And so like they were not happy with the jokes being made about them needing, bulletproof backpacks, for instance, right? So like the question that I guess I'm asking is that if they feel threatened more, could that force them to make changes to gun laws out of their own sense of self-preservation? Because they're the only ones with the power and money and influence to possibly make changes. Matt?
Nah.
Think so?
I don't. Nope. I think, and I'll tell you exactly why I don't think that'll happen. Because I saw a video from, and I can't remember who it was, some fucking 1%er dude who was up in his penthouse apartment around his Christmas tree talking about all you poor fucks, and this is how Christmas is supposed to look, right? All you idiots with no presents. Here's what it's supposed to look like, you poor fucks, right? Immediately after this happened, the guy who took over for Brian Thompson said, "We're not going to change the way that we're doing business. We're going to continue to prevent unneeded treatment and care as we always have." So they don't care. Listen, it would take a lot more Luigi Mangionis to do what Luigi Mangione did for the top 1% to feel like they're untouchable. It would take a lot more. Right now, absolutely not. There will be no change. And why do I think there will be no change? Because the people that were going to meet Brian Thompson at that hotel stepped over his body to make the meeting on time. They don't care. The only thing, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, I will die on this hill. The only thing they care about is the profits in their pockets and the betterment of their investments. That's it.
On the firearm side, Brett, I'm sorry, Ben, it might go the other way. They might decide they might need armed security details. So that might actually bring more guns into the streets, because now they feel like they need to have, armed guards surrounding them as they get out of their penthouses into their limos.
Yeah. Yeah. Brett?
I agree. I don't, because I jumped into a bunch of conversations about this right after it happened. And the part where, like Steve had said, was it going to start a revolution? My thing is that it would only if people would keep talking about it. So when there was a bunch of outcry originally, that wanes. You saw it the same thing like here in Uvalde. People were upset. The country was in uproar, right? And as the weeks go on, people talk about it less and less and less and less until it's the point where hardly anybody's talking about it except for the people that, follow us for that. And we continue to talk about these things. But people just stop caring. People will be like, "Oh yeah, viva la revolution," but then when it just fizzles out because people do not want to feel uncomfortable. If you have to take the step to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, people aren't going to do it.
Well, to that point, like I agree with everybody. I was, curious though what anyone thought, because Americans like we like our modern conveniences too much for revolution, right? Like that's why there won't be really a revolution here. Like I like my air conditioning and my, daily commute, having my, HBO Max or whatever, like to stream at night. And we get too caught up in those conveniences, right? To actually, sacrifice a little bit for what it would take to like make this. Because no one's going to move into a cave to hold off like a revolutionary fight against the U.S. government. Like anytime these like people like the 2A Gravy SEALs are like, "I'll fight the government. I could beat them with my AR-15." I'm just like, yeah, you'd make it till like lunch, and then you're like, I got to go to McDonald's, government. We got to stop this fight so I can go get me a Big Mac, right? Like Americans are, for better or for worse, we're lazy, right?
But
And we get
yes,
complacent.
exactly. Well, and to that, right? Like if everybody would just for a week, just 1 week, if everybody would not go to school, they didn't go to their jobs or anything like that. If we literally shut shit down for a week, I guarantee we could get some firearm laws changed. Guaranteed. But people are too terrified because it hasn't affected them directly yet. But this is America. This is not the land of if it's going to happen. It's the land of when it's going to happen. And that's what it is. So I try to tell people all the time, you gotta fight. You gotta fight before you're in my shoes because it sucks. Like my mental health has been just in the dumps lately with the holidays. We don't Uzi's not here. We have one less person here. Like my kids didn't even want to really do Christmas this year. Um, and then with this thing with the cops, like I I wish I was just uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is so much easier than the mental health issues that I face today. And it's frustrating that people just don't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Matt?
No, I mean it all comes back to uh like everything here comes back to just this uh desire to have everything palatable, right? Brett talks about people being in their comfort zone, right? Nobody wants to be outside of their comfort zone. Nobody likes being uncomfortable. Nobody, right? Nobody. But there was a saying that I heard a long time ago, and it's kind of stuck with me. There is no growth in your comfort zone, period. There is no growth there. If you're in your comfort zone, you're just sitting on your heels. You're not moving forward. You're stuck. You've set up camp. You're done, right? The only way that we progress, and when I say progress, I mean move forward in a betterment for everybody, is by getting a little uncomfortable. We have to be willing to get uncomfortable. Nobody likes picking up the phone and making a phone call. I fucking hate making phone calls. I hate talking on the phone. Hate it. It's uncomfortable. Don't like it. I'll do it because there's shit that I need to get done, right? There's shit that I need to get done, right? There is absolutely, when we talk about like these social media apps and, YouTube and the current generation of the United States of America, the fact that they forget why they were upset last week or why they were starting to get a little radicalized last week because a new movie came out that has distracted them from the real issue, right? You heard a lot of people talking about last week about how, Luigi Mangione and Brian Thompson, and this might be the start of where the class comes together. We start seeing what's really fucking important around here. And it's really not a left versus right, but a working class versus a ruling class type of situation. And what are we seeing this week? Not that.
Well, yeah.
Not that.
Immediately then it was the drones, right? Like we
Right.
were paying too much attention to the drones to worry about this class consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah. So, the attention span of the average United States of American citizen is about that of a fucking cracked up fruit fly. right? I mean, like you're not they're not paying attention to anything. If
That's
it's
the
not
clip.
in their face constantly 100% all the time, then we move on to the next shiny thing. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. And you forget where the fuck you were just walking from.
Isn't that the
That's the
point,
clip.
though?
That is the clip.
That's the clip. The
Yeah.
cracked up fruit
Cracked
fly.
up fruit fly. That's the clip for the promo. Steve.
I was going to say, I mean, that's the point. The distraction is the point, right? That is exactly the point. The distraction from messaging about the trans community, about immigrants, about whatever it might be. Meanwhile, the ruling class is raping us all on a daily. You know, you see that's exactly the goal. That is by design. I mean, apathy and is the goal. They hope the exhaustion of all the fights that we have to fight for just standing up for basic fucking human rights, they think eventually will just go away. It's just like, again, part of the model in the insurance industry is to deny claims because they know that most people won't pursue it. Most people
Yep.
won't follow through. Most people will get exhausted. You know, I've always thought if we're talking about colloquialisms here, I've always liked the greatest change in life is on the other side of the door of fear. You know, those opportunities for growth and change are there, but most people just aren't willing to take the risk and
Yep.
to change the things that we want to talk about. Again, basic fundamental appreciation of human rights, protecting our most vulnerable. The fact that we have to fight for that is obviously our mission. But again, the fact that we have to fight for that tells us who we are as a nation. We got to accept it. This is who we are. This is who we are.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It is absolutely who we are, you know. And when we think about like the distraction piece, right? Like, you know, I think we've learned this for about a decade or two at this point, right? Because Twitter, I think, really taught us that Americans don't have an attention span, right? Like if you can
Cracked
sum
up fruit fly, apparently.
Cracked up fruit
Cracked up
flies.
cracked
Yeah.
up fruit fly, right? Like I'll never forget that. But like think about like how like in when Twitter first came out, it was 120 characters, and people would get their news off of a 120 character tweet, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so basically a headline, and to the point now that people will read a headline, and Matt, you and I have dealt with people that do this all the time. They'll bring a headline up of something, but they haven't read the fucking article, right?
Yep.
And the headline is designed just to grab your attention. It's clickbaity as hell.
It's the original clickbait.
Yeah, exactly. And but then they haven't read the damn article. And you know, I don't know how we fix this because the industry all of us play in, right, and some of us work in, it is designed for that kind of like engagement, right? Like we're wanting clicks and views and likes and things like that. But in some ways, it has destroyed American discourse.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's one of the reasons I got on TikTok in the beginning was because I saw I'm like, you know, somebody who served in politics. I've been involved in this, and you know, I'm educated. I've been informed of all these things, and what I do professionally requires me to be factual. I have to primary source. I put my client's reputation, my own professional credibility at risk. And I'm watching all this shit. There is so much misinformation out there and disinformation. People are just fucking lying. Are we pushing back as a society? So again, like I say this a lot, we should never relent on the truth. The problem is, and I've talked about this before, I think I shared this with you, Ben, about how right-wing echo chambers in particular dominate social media. They absolutely dominate. It's not even a level playing field. We're not even in the game when you talk about that. So yes, we can be critical of messaging from the Democrats, and I will always be critical of that, but it's also lack of messengers. So our fight to push back against headline news, bumper sticker politics is a big uphill fight. And that's, again, fracturing. It's nice to have a big tent, lots of voices in the Democratic Party. But the problem with lots of voices, that means a lot of people have to have the same message. And that's never the case.
Yeah, but and not disagreeing with anything you just said, Steve. But I do want to kind of highlight though, when it goes back to the messaging part, right? One of the things that the right does really well, right? Especially thinking about the gun industry, right? They have these pithy little catchphrases, right? Like it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun, right?
Sure.
That makes sense if you don't critically analyze it, right? Like the left, those of us who are progressive, we don't have any such catchphrases. We instead want to inundate you with facts and statistics and like nuance, And
Boring shit.
person just kind of losses out and kind of fades out, right?
Mhm.
How do we deal with that?
It's bumper sticker
have to-
politics that we talked about. Think about campaigns. Lock her up, stop the steal, fuck Joe Biden. I mean, these have been, we've got examples through in some of the most successful marketing campaigns in history. Just do it. Where's the beef? It's a tactic. I've
Mhm.
studied this shit. It is a tactic. It works. You know?
The left needs to get really good at dumbing down their messaging to 3 fucking words.
I've got it. I've got it. Y'all ready? Fuck your guns.
Power of the pussy.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I mean, legitimately though, I mean, the left needs to, we deal in facts and data and statistics and science and research and all this other shit, and we can go through and explain to you why the COVID vaccines are safe and effective. We can go through and tell you about the science that has been in developed for 40 fucking years surrounding mRNA vaccines. We can go through and tell you about why you're not you don't have a microchip implanted in you when you get the vaccine. We can go through and explain the science to you, right? But the reality of the situation is that for the majority of people in the United States of America, the science is going to go over their head. The majority of America is reading at a 6th grade reading level, right? The majority of America does not have necessarily the ability or the attention span to listen to what we are trying to say. And that's why we have to, why is the right so fucking good at it? Because they've dumbed down their messaging to 3 fucking words every time they say something.
Right.
They're catchy
Even
with their
less than 3.
catchphrases.
So, like sometimes it's just the acronym FJB.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And, let's go, Brandon. Right. It's, lock her up.
Yeah.
It's this ridiculously simple messaging that is catchy, easy to latch on to, and easy to remember. Whereas we're over here talking about so what mRNA actually stands for is mononuclear, and that's
Article
what it
1,
sounds
Section
like,
8,
right?
Clause 15 and 16.
That's what it sounds like.
27 words.
What
Yeah.
mRNA sounds like, or what mRNA actually stands for, is micro, right? And that's all they get.
Start
Is that
sounding like
fuck?
the-
This guy's gonna preach to me now. When really, what we need to be doing is something catchy, like vaccines cause adults, or something. Like
That can save lives.
We
Yeah.
started sounding like the teachers from Peanuts.
yeah,
Yeah.
womp,
Yeah.
womp, 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 womp,
Exactly.
womp.
Yeah. And hearing that and recognizing that is exactly how Americans take this makes me want to go take a bath with my toaster.
God
I
damn
mean,
it.
But I think that's where the disconnect with why is the left so bad at getting people excited about their messaging? It's because we're dealing in complex issues and we're trying to approach it in a complex way. What we need to do is take these complex issues and say, okay, Steve, you're a lot smarter about things than I am. So explain this to me, and then I'm going to explain it back to you as if I am a dumb Marine grunt that doesn't know my red from my blue. And I want you to tell me if I've got the gist of it. And if I can do that and I can dumb it down so that the average Marine Corps infantryman can understand what Steve is trying to explain to everybody, then we've got a way to message it, right? But if we just continue to take it from a purely academic stance, which I have absolutely no issue with it, right? Like the academia of everything is brilliant. That's where all the data comes from. I love data. I'm a huge fucking nerd. I play Dungeons and Dragons. Math is cool, right? Okay, yes. But the majority of the United States of America is not that.
Yeah.
I can tell you this: I'm never going to put math is cool on a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
I'll
No.
leave that for you
I
guys.
did.
The problem is that we like people like LeVar Burton and they don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's
We
the thing.
watch the Reading Rainbow.
And they don't.
Here's the thing. I mean, that's how I ended up on TikTok, right? Like I got really fucking tired of publishing this scientific research that no fucking body reads, except for other academics who are only reading enough of it to cite it in whatever thing they're publishing, right? Like I don't even think the people who cite me have read everything that's in that whole article, right? Like they read enough to cite and move on. And so I got really tired, and I came onto this app to present the research in layman's terms, right? Like here are, no jargon, no like weird, like trying to explain what a logistic regression is or anything like that. Like here it is. But how many of us have seen that even a video that's short, like 15 seconds, 20 seconds in, they just scroll on out, right? Like I got tired of looking at those statistics. I don't know about the rest of you, because it's depressing as fuck, especially on something I spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like something Matt just said, I think is really important. Like the four of us could sit in a room, we could have different opinions on an economic policy, for example, and we'd hash it out. We talk about the specifics of it. And we feel like that's progress. We feel like we're making progress. We're trying to solve a problem here. Meanwhile, we've got the other side who doesn't matter. Like the example you guys just gave is really relevant. It's the headline, it's the clickbait. And that sadly wins, which goes back to education, right? That goes right back to pushing back with critical thinking skills and avoiding Dunning-Kruger. We see that a lot. And then cognitive dissonance creeps in there. There's a little willful ignorance, like a big salad of misinformation. And that's how we lose elections, sadly.
Yeah. Yep.
By the way, if anybody wants to pay me to talk about the shit that I already talk about, I'm game. I think Steve and Matt and Ben would agree to it as well.
I'm down.
I'm just saying, we're going to talk about this shit anyway, so kick a few bucks. Damn.
I'm down.
Yeah. Like I just need to get paid to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what it comes down to, right?
I mean, we're joking about it, but this is how people like Charlie Kirk and fucking Nick Fuentes and all of them, I mean, they get paid to spout the bullshit.
Right.
But people who are telling the truth and know the facts and everything, we have to do this just because we love to tell the facts.
Right.
We care.
Yeah. Well,
care.
and that's the big thing that I took away from the election is that the right will spend millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars on non-traditional mediums of media, right? Podcast, social media, conferences, rallies. They put all of this money into all of these things, and that excites their voter base. Whereas the Democrat Party spends billions of dollars on traditional media. Nobody's watching traditional media. None of it. The largest voter base that aged into being eligible to vote this year was Gen Z, right? The largest voter base that aged into being able to vote this year was Gen Z. They're not watching CNN. They're not watching MSNBC. They're on this damn thing. They're watching TikTok. They're listening to podcasts, right? And the left does not invest in that at all. If we want it, I've been saying it for weeks now. If we want to see a change in the messaging from the left, then we need to start moving into non-traditional spheres of media. If we don't, it's like you said, Steve, if we don't, we're completely outnumbered as it is right now. It's not even fair. It is not even fair. We are so behind the 8 ball right now that it is going to be a ridiculously uphill battle for all of us to try to even wrestle back a piece of that market. But it is going to be exponentially more difficult if we continue to not have the support of established, organizations and people pushing this information into those spheres.
Right. Well said.
Well, you may be behind the 8 ball, but that cracked out fruit fly is right on top of it.
Yeah,
Totally.
listen, he's all over it. All right. He doesn't know why he's there anymore, but he's all over it.
Yeah. Well, and to Matt's point about the traditional media, right? Like I canceled cable, God, like 4 or 5 years ago Like I have all the streaming platforms or whatever. So I watch stuff on there, but I get all of my news from social media for like the last 4 or 5 years. Like I'll see something on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, now Blue Sky, right? And then that makes me go and investigate and read to see what's going on. I can't tell you the last time I turn on a news broadcast because it's all freaking editorialists. It's all people like Tucker Carlson or even like Jon Stewart, who I love. They're editorialists. They're not news journalists.
Correct.
Well, literally every morning, this is how I get my news. I wake up, do what I got to do, take my kids to school or whatever. And then as I'm coming back from dropping off my kids from school, I turn on Steve and I listen to Steve because he's always got information going on. And if he says something that I hadn't heard, then when I get back to the house, then I start looking it up, and then Steve, ends, I jump on Adams, do the same thing. Then Matt gets on and then I jump on Matt. Like I'm always constantly listening. So by the time I go live, even though I don't talk about the majority of shit that y'all talk about, I can still touch on it enough if it gets brought up, and that's how most people do. Like I said, I get my news from y'all. I get my news from my Discord, y'all's Discords, because we're sharing information with each other that end up becoming TikToks.
Yeah. Well, and
I get my news from Mickey Mouse. I don't know about the rest of y'all.
Yeah,
that's where I get my news from.
Mickey Mouse texts the group chat, right? But no, that's part of why they want the app gone, right? They want the app gone because we are so easily able to inform each other to a degree that like they can't put out the propaganda fast enough to dissuade us, right? Like because we can so fast share. But we also see like the traditional media for the same reason wants us gone because we have, if you think about like, during the election, so many of the influencers were invited to be like with Harris's campaign and things in ways that the traditional media did not have that access in this case. And it's because we are the people who reach the people of America today.
Right. Yep. I participated in a couple of creator houses leading up to the election where they brought 20 or so people out to create content around. And those 20 people, when we were in Atlanta, those 20 people that were there were able to get 30 million unique interactions on messaging that wasn't going out any other way. Yeah. 30 million people listened to what 20 people had to say. Those are huge numbers.
Yep.
Those are huge numbers. And I will continue to say it, and I will die on this hill also. The Democrat Party will never win another election if they continue to ignore non-traditional media.
Yep.
Period.
Well, you look at.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, if you look at how Trump focused his efforts on podcasts and TikTok and Truth Social and other like social media platforms, and then the Harris campaign was like CNN and MSNBC and things like that. Obviously, the traditional media didn't reach the people they should.
A huge disconnect.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brett.
Oh no, I was just saying a huge disconnect.
Yeah, I mean the Musk administration now with Elon Musk being the richest man in the world, don't think that he won't be putting in bids to buy traditional media. So then the circle gets even smaller.
Exactly.
And this again, I've studied this stuff. I worked in media for 20 years. This has been the long game the right's been playing, just like packing the courts. They've been so far. The ironic part about this, and here's the irony, right? We look at conservatism as old-fashioned. We look at it as regressive, but yet they have been so far ahead of us in what we would refer to as progressive media, social media channels, and how they do it, and how they advertise, and what their messaging is like. They're kicking our ass, and we got to lick our fucking wounds and try to fight back against it. Now, though, you've got again the richest man in the world in charge of the Musk administration, who pulls so many levers. Think about what they want to do. They want to control the FCC, which means controlling the airwaves. They want to buy up all these spaces. They want to say antitrust. They want to bring everybody in their circle into a tighter circle, pushing everybody else out. I don't want to say it's too late, but somebody there's got to be as much money involved coming from the left to push back on shit like this.
That's what I'm saying. the four of us right here and the other 100,000 of us that are just doing this every single day, we're not the ones that are going to be able to really fight back against this if we don't have the support from people with the means and resources to be able to fight back against this.
Exactly. I mean, like, talking about kids being, kids dying in school,
Yeah.
and we lose that fight because there's not enough of us doing it. And
Well,
apathy from the left, and apathy is the end of democracy, in my estimation.
But all right, even think about this, right? Like, and this is something like I really want to aim at Brett here for just a second, because like I want to just like, Brett and I combined have half of the followers that a school shooter on TikTok currently has. Right? Like, what does that say about like what people want, right? Brett, you and I have had conversations with this person, and you have like really had conversations with this person. We don't name shooters, so I'm not going to name him so people go look him up. But there's a school shooter on the app that has 240,000 followers.
Yep.
But, I mean, that's the amygdala. That's the brain looking for controversy.
Right.
That's it. I mean, like we talked about earlier, human rights and conversations about COVID and conversations about democracy are fucking boring. People don't want to hear it.
Yep.
It's not consumable. It doesn't fire up response. It's not catchy.
Yep.
It's not exciting.
And a lot of that goes to the way that traditional media has I don't want to say brainwashed, but brainwashed entire generations of people to look for the action crime story all the fucking time. Action News 5. We don't report the mainstream media for decades up until right now to the present has been focused on the worst aspects of society. Always, constantly. They'll end with that little fluff piece of like, and here we are at the pumpkin patch for Pumpkin Fest 2024. But that's it. You get 14 seconds of a kid running around trying to pick a pumpkin that just followed an hour and a half of 73 people were, murdered today in downtown Cincinnati, and that's all you get all the time. And so our brains have become accustomed to, well, if it's not drama, if it's not action, if it's not exciting, I don't want to watch it.
Think of the alternative. I think we're all on Blue Sky, right? Have you guys seen any advertisement from Blue Sky on TikTok? I haven't.
Nope.
Not a fucking one. That's an example. Like, is the expectation that we'll just find it and then grow it organically on our own? That's not how you fight back.
So, I mean, that's a conversation, but like one of the things that like I've seen, and I don't want to go too far into the segue, but like is that they may start charging us for like tiers of membership, or they may put advertisements. So there are things that they are talking about.
Yeah, agreed. But again, it should have happened months ago. That's my point. Years ago.
App has been out
years ago.
for a year.
Yeah.
Blue Sky's been out for a year.
I know.
I was on it last December.
Yeah. Matt still does not follow me back on it, but like I
did.
Matt follows me, man. So
did not follow me. Yeah, Matt follows everybody but me.
Like, Matt's in the Fruit Fly Guild.
Okay. I'm not loved. But no, like I've only been on it since October, I think is when I joined the app. And I didn't really start posting on it until the election, because that's when everybody started migrating over there. And I started with just fighting the third-party voters, linking them, to the horrific things that are happening due to their, idiocy in voting for Jill Stein or RFK, or whatever.
Yeah.
But when I went over there and created an account, no one was using it, right? Like somebody had like mentioned it that we were maybe going there, and I got over there and they were like, on my feed it was the same 3 people. And now it's actually kind of grown and actually looks like that it's being used, which I think is great.
I got on it last year, but there wasn't an app, so I didn't want to log into a web browser every time. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just I forgot about it until, right around the election. Everybody's like, we're going back. And I'm like, I think I may have an account over there somewhere.
Just
I
use the
yeah.
Truth Social launch as an example, right? They messaged to get their users on Truth Social. Every single day you saw ads for it on his campaign rallies. This is what I'm talking about. These are subtle things, but this is powerful.
What I was going to get to is like, is this like let me put this out there. I love Blue Sky. It's great. It fills that niche that Threads didn't do for me and Mastodon didn't do for me for Twitter when Elon took over. But my problem with it is that it's so easy to block any people who are like, you're not agreeing with you. That I feel like even more than TikTok, it silos us into echo chambers.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing that I will continuously push back on the echo chamber argument, right? Steve, Brett, Ben, and myself are sitting here. We're aligned on probably 90% of everything but I guarantee you that there would be an issue that we will not agree on, right? An important issue that we will not agree on.
Yeah.
And we will be able to have those conversations. The left is made up of so many degrees of people when it comes to where they want to see the country moving forward, right? So this idea is like, oh, here's a left-wing echo chamber. I don't subscribe to that argument because the left has so many variations on opinions about how things need to happen that it's mind-boggling. We might all agree that it needs to get to this, but how we get there and the way that we go about getting there is going to be wildly different. And there will be heated arguments and discussions from everybody on the left about how the best way to go about doing it. Contrast that with the right, right? The people on the right, it's like, man, I hate them immigrants. Yeah, me too. Let's go get some Bud Light. That's it.
It's true.
That's it.
I want to build off that, and then since we're like 15 minutes from the show being over, we'll each make like 5-6 minutes each doing last words. But I want to touch on that real quick, Matt, in that that leads to a statement we have in political sociology and political science that says Democrats fall in love while Republicans fall in line, right? And and to touch on that famous scene from the newsroom that I use and a lot of other people like to use is like, if Democrats are so star-spangled awesome, why do they lose so goddamn always, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's because that we can't come up at just like the right will just fall in line and vote for whoever they're told to vote for, and they'll do it. But the Democrats, like if a person doesn't meet their ideological purity test in their fucking minds, right? Like, look at how many people are like, well, I don't like Harris because of how she's been doing with Palestine. I'm like, she's the vice president. She hasn't done a damn thing with Palestine, right?
Right.
Like, but because they have it in their head that she's not ideologically perfect for whatever cause, they can't support her. Whereas the Republicans fall right into line and supported their candidate.
Yeah. And that's always been the case. And that aligns with the right strategy. Like I said, I've been studying this for a long time. This goes back decades. They literally are consistent, clear bumper sticker advertising, bumper sticker politics. And when you literally, that's why I say we don't want to relent on the truth, but we lose the messaging fight because, again, education, Brett said it earlier, fifth grade reading level, easily consumable. They'll yell and scream in their spaces. And something Matt said is really, really important. I push back on the echo chamber as well because we find a lot of good dialogue. Even people that we think are aligned with our messaging still have blind spots. And all of us have blind spots, right? On certain things. It's about how we align on moving the needle forward is the challenge, right? And we spend a lot of time on that piece. That's the hard part. I agree.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Steve,
So-
well, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Matt. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, we could start doing our kind of final thoughts, but if you want to start us, you can start us.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, like, we've had a lot of, kind of all over the place in terms of the conversation tonight. But I think everything kind of boils down to if we want to see any kind of effective change in the United States of America, one, the left needs to get not just better at their messaging, but more consistent in how they message, where they message, who they're messaging to, and why they're messaging, right? this argument that, you know, the messaging that they put out on traditional media didn't reach the intended audience. It absolutely did. It was those boomers, you know, it was the people in the older age demographics that consistently vote, right? But why do we keep talking to those people? Well, we keep talking to those people because they consistently vote. But the people that we want to vote aren't consistently voting because we're not talking to them, right? We don't bring them to the table. We don't go out and meet them where they're at. We expect them to come to us and not us go to them. So if we want to see effective change in the United States of America, if we want to see us progress in a way that is going to be beneficial for all of the citizens of this country, then we need to start meeting people where they're at and not getting pissed off at them when they didn't show up in our space.
100% agree. Steve.
Same problems exist that we've had for a long time: wealth and income inequality, lack of access to health care, gun violence epidemic, education. The same system. It's just how they're packaged and how they're framed. And I agree. These conversations are so incredibly important. And I'm always amazed at, you know, I would consider the three of you friends, but these conversations I feel like we've reached a spot where we're always looking for the what's next. Like, what do we do now? We all agree that these are the same problems that we've always had. And I've been accused of being a bit Pollyanna in my life because I'll always choose to see the glass half full, and I always will. And maybe to my detriment, I don't know. But I want action. It can't be just the four of us. Apathy is where democracies go to die. And I agree something that Brett said earlier about how people were talking about the Luigi situation, and then it kind of fizzled out, except for the four of us. Because I talk about it every fucking day. I'm tired of corporations and billionaires. I'm sick and tired of the Democrats taking money from billionaires, independents, you know, moderates. I don't give a shit. I'm sick and tired of the billionaire class. And unless our country decides that, yes, this is class war, then none of these things that we talk about that we consider important will ever fucking change. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Brett, you want to have your thoughts and then I'll wrap up?
Yeah, so my thoughts are all over the place. Like I said, I've been struggling with my mental health. First things first, I just hope that I can one day grow a beard as white and as beautiful as both of y'all's. I want y'all to know that. I really do appreciate it. In fact, this is the first time that Ben's been the only one without facial hair, so I appreciate that more. Fuck him and all 6'4" of him.
Matt is basically my height, just so y'all know.
I'm literally not. I am 5'9" tall.
I'm taller than Matt.
Matt's tall.
I'm in the middle.
Not.
Dear God. I say we fight, Ben. Like, this is just for all of our short kings out here.
I am too tall. Yeah, Matt.
Shut up. But man, I mean, it's hard to talk after both Matt and Steve talk. I think that this episode should be named "Get McAngry with Your Facts." I'm gonna throw that out there.
Boom.
Boom. Done. That's it.
Hail the flute
Pretty
line.
good.
Yeah.
McAngry with your facts. That's the name of the.
And before we go, I want y'all to share out y'all's your names on all your social platforms and everything. But for my last words, because this has been weighing heavily on me, fuck the older millennial and fuck the Uvalde, any cop that was in Uvalde.
So yeah, we can. Matt, you want to tell your socials and stuff real quick?
Yep, it's USMC Angry Veteran across all platforms.
And your merch store is the same.
Yep, same thing. USMCAngryVeteran.com.
Yeah, Steve, do the same thing.
Facts Still Matter on Blue Sky and on YouTube, and you find me in those particular places. And again, we're still raising money for Brett. In the link to the merch store is in the link tree in my bio and all my socials.
Perfect. All right. So for my final words, like kind of what I want to leave with is that this fight has to happen every day, right? This is not something that we should only be doing when there is a mass shooting, right? Like, we should not just be
Preach.
something like Uvalde happens and then we fight for a week And then we're like, okay, I did what I can do, and go back to our lives. Because, Brett will tell you, and I tell you, just like from knowing the different people I do, that like it's much different to fight from where I'm at, Steve's at, Matt's at, than where Brett is, right? And people on Brett's side of it are always like, I wish I'd have fought before, right? And I wasn't always. It was, like I said, it was Sandy Hook for me. We need to all do more, right? This needs to be a constant thing where we're calling our politicians, writing our politicians, going to protests to push for this every damn day. It shouldn't just be the parents that lost their kids that are doing the bulk of this, right? It is something that all of us have to do. And that's where I'm going to land my plane. So thank you all for joining us. This has been an episode of the Stories from the Cold Dead Hands. We'll be back next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Maybe at one point there will be no more stories to tell. But until then, signing off.
This has been Stories from the Cold Dead Hands with Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow and Brett Cross. Hopefully one day we will not have any stories to tell. But until that day arrives, remember to love one another and be kind to each other. Until next week, signing off.